This is actually a property that I did with the previous company that I worked for, but I have a pretty robust history in working in kitchens and then a pretty extensive background in custom construction. I've been working in real estate full-time for about 3 years. I started with Joe Homebuyer as a lead/acquisition manager for them. In my first year with that company, I actually was a top 5 acquisition manager in the country, which was pretty shocking because I had 0 experience coming into it. And another fun fact, not only am I a great acquisition manager, I'm the president of nhreia, and I have never owned a piece of real estate on my own. And these wonderful people right here are the big reason why I do it. That is my fiance and my son, who turns 2 next month, so everyone wish him happy birthday. Woo! Now onto the property. This is 206 Shore Drive in Salem. It's located, this is kind of a small picture, but it's located in this weird little jog on the waterfront. So the road went over, there was a bridge that went over this little canal, and then it was this little tiny lake that it had the waterfront access to. And then this side is this huge lake that was much more desirable, but it's technically a waterfront property. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath, just over 1,500 square feet, on about a quarter acre, but it was a really nice private lot. You had some really nice views off the back deck there, and it was in a recreational community, so there was a small yearly fee for it, but it was unique, and outside of the amount of junk in there, it was in pretty good shape. So this was a little bit of what it looked like, and I apologize because this was something that I did with the previous company that I worked for, so I don't have as many pictures as I was looking for, but this is the best I could find on my phone from 2 years ago. That was the exterior. This is one of the sheds outside, just filled to the brim with anything he thought was worth 20 cents. You can see on the deck here, some of the caps are missing. You can't really tell, but this Trex decking was in pretty rough shape. I think that was the initial, product drop for Trex back in 2002. I don't know what the story is here, but he was missing his electrical meter. He had also jerry-rigged a propane tank on the outside for his stove, so there's a couple of DIY mishaps in there. Furnace was in pretty rough shape, but still functional, according to him. As you can see here, I don't know if you can tell, but that is a chairlift right there. The
Whoa.
gentleman had recently lost half his foot to diabetes. He wasn't supposed to be driving, but he was driving pretty much anywhere he wanted to go. And obviously, had some mobility issues getting around the house. Obviously, some things are pretty dated. That AstroTurf carpet, I don't think that's in style anymore. I'm not an interior designer, but it wouldn't be my first choice. The black and white tile, I think it looks nice, but I probably wouldn't put that on the market. Now, a little bit about how this gentleman came into my point of view. So like I said, when I started with Joe Homebuyer, I was a lead manager / acquisition manager. So I was the first hire for the company when they started out here, and I got put on desk duty because they hired somebody that had about 15, 20 years of direct-to-seller sales. So I was on for about a month on the road. I closed, I think it was 3 deals in that first month before he started, and then I got relegated to the desk duty. So this lead came in May of 2023 from a cold calling service that we had. So I took the live transfer, had the initial inbound call with him, and then sent it off to the acquisition manager. He went out there and took a look at the house, started negotiating with the guy, and he was really hell-bent on this borderline market price of $450,000. And he had goals that he wanted to accomplish, and that money was more of a want than a goal. And the guy that went out on the appointment couldn't get him down to a more realistic number to accomplish his goals and not necessarily his wants. So at that point, he kind of disappeared into the ether. We couldn't really get in touch with him. After that first meeting ended, I believe I only had 2 more points of contact with this gentleman over the next 11 months. He would answer every 3 or 4 months, but most of the time I would call him every week, every 2 weeks, whatever it was, and it would go right to voicemail. I never actually got him back on the phone. It took a very long time to have another meaningful conversation with this gentleman. So this is kind of what the timeline looked like. From the time that lead came in on May 15th to when he fell off the grid, it was an 11-month time, 11 months of time that had passed. And I only got him on the phone 2 more times in that period. I talked to him in November and January. Outside of that, it was radio silence. I was checking for listings. He had not put it on the market. The property had not sold, but it was 11 months of borderline radio silence because we did not close on that initial date. And then finally, after 11 months, he had some things going on and agreed in April of the following year of 2024 that I could come back to the house and talk to him again. And at this point, I was a full-fledged acquisition manager. I was the only employee at the company, and I went out there and talked to him. I had some notes from the original meeting. I kind of had an idea of what was going on in his life, but not a full picture. But he finally let me come back to the table with him. And at that point, on April 16th, 2024, we worked out all of the finer details of the agreement. And we got pen to paper. It was a little bit of a long-winded transaction. And it was a little while until the close date was going to happen, but we got the agreement in place, and we were, heading towards closing at that point. And the key takeaways from this seems like a really long period of time, and it was. Usually, if somebody disappears for months at a time, you're not going to get them back on the 11th month. But the most important part of that is that he hadn't blocked my number, he hadn't threatened to call the cops on me, he hadn't sent me any threatening letters or anything like that. I kept following up with him. I wasn't knocking at his door, I wasn't calling him 3 times a day, but I stayed front of mind for him. I kept following up, and that's key when you're looking for these off-market deals. Very rarely do people come to you and say, hey, buy my house below market price, that'd be great. And as I touched on earlier, he had some things going on. So in that 11 months, he lost half his foot to diabetes. And he was in and out of the hospitals, he was dealing with wounds not healing, he was really struggling with his health. He still had that same goal in mind of what he wanted to accomplish with the money, but there were some other things in his life that were preventing him from being able to do that. So I assumed at some point he wanted to talk to me, but I also assumed that something was going on that was preventing that decision from being made. And the final key is don't give up. I could have gone 3 months from not hearing from him and said, this guy's not interested, then I would have lost out on the deal. Until somebody tells you, I'm gonna call the cops, they threaten you, they send you, arsenic in the mail, whatever it might be, you can keep calling. They'll either block your number or they'll tell you to stop. And this is what the deal looked like. So keep in mind, I'm a wholesaler, so the end goal of this negotiation was to be able to sign the contract. This gentleman had the goal of being able to move all this stuff into an RV, and remember, he's not supposed to be driving, but move all this stuff into an RV, tag a car on the back, and drive around the country and just chase 70-degree weather wherever he goes. So the ARV on the property, I had it right around 335, somewhere between, 535 and 550. That's kind of where I pegged it. Needed about $70,000 in rehab, and a huge chunk of that was junk removal. You saw some of the pictures of the sheds. There were 3 sheds out there, one of which had an old MG car that was, maybe worth some scrap metal at that point. Squirrels had gotten into pretty much everything out there. There was junk throughout the house. There was a lot of junk removal that needed to happen. Kitchen needed some updating, some cosmetics throughout, but pretty small square footage, so it was all manageable under $100,000. Where I got the property was $385. Now that's typically a little high for me, but where he was debt-wise and with what he wanted to be able to accomplish, I beat him down. I don't really like saying that, but he was at $450. I got him down to $385, and that's where the numbers were. That got everything he wanted done, and that was a price that I could actually make an assignment on it and be able to make it happen in a short period of time for him. Our close date was just about a month from the 16th when we got it under contract, and here's where it got a little messy. The extras that we tagged on there. And I know Tim Burrow, I know you can hear me back there, but he'll talk about this next month. He was not super happy with some of these terms, but the key was understanding what he needed. So the price wasn't the sticking point for him. The sticking point was that he needed time to be able to deal with his affairs on his own. He didn't want to be rushed out of his house. He had been there for, I believe it was 27 years at that point. He didn't want to feel forced out of his house. He wanted to do it on his own time and on a timeline that made sense for him. So we got him the financial means that he needed to be able to do what he wanted to do, but then I had to give him time. So in order to do that, I gave him a 2-month escrow holdback. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, basically at the point of closing, so on May 15th, the title company held $5,000 in an escrow account. And the day that he left, that money was released to him, as long as he didn't strip the copper out of the house, punch any holes in the wall, and he left on time. In addition to that, I gave him a $5,000 moving allowance to be able to put deposits down on the RV that he wanted. So that money came out in addition to the purchase price. So this number in reality was about $390. And one of the keys to these provisions down here in an assignment of contract is that passes on to the end buyer. So Tim will touch on that next month. But the inspection, basically, we walked through 48 hours after the agreement, or within 48 to 72 hours after the agreement with investors that are looking at the property. We put our suggested starting bid at $400, so we were earmarking a $15,000 assignment. And like I just touched on, the end purchaser is responsible for all of those obligations, so Tim had to fulfill the underlying contract. And he actually didn't even walk through the property. I had enough rapport with him at that point that he trusted my numbers on it. He looked at the pictures, and he was willing to offer what was originally $423, I believe, but after some concessions due to those extra provisions, we knocked it down to $408 for him to be able to get it done. And everything went smoothly. The guy was out on time. Tim was able to get the house for a price that he liked, and next month you can see exactly how that flip went for him. So with that being said, does anyone have any questions?
How long did it take for the guy to move out?
I believe he was out like 3 days before the end of the escrow holdback period.
Wow.
Yeah, he was right up against it. I did one of those for Brad too. He didn't like it that much either.
How did you initially find the deal? Was it church mail or just calling?
So that was a cold calling lead. At this point in time, I had a company that did both direct mail and they also had a cold calling service. I will say just from experience, any outsourced cold calling, it's not a great return on money, and you're kind of flooded with leads of people that, if they get somebody say, yeah, I'll sell my house for $1 million, you're gonna end up talking to that person for 15 minutes, and they have no intention of selling. Their house to be worth 200 grand, but they'll take $1 million for it. So they're not great at vetting motivation. This gentleman actually had it, so it's, you sort through about 40 to 50 junk leads before you find somebody that's actually motivated to sell.
That was also that you were willing to pony up a bit of extra cash to help him with his route. He's not going to wholesale do it.
I do it a lot. I mean, that's, not only is it a great way to get people to, their end goals, but it also takes some money out of the closing price. So if I offer a cash advance outside of the closing, it saves them a little bit on taxes, 20, 30 bucks here and there, but it's not in their transfer tax and or their capital gains tax. So I'm always happy to put money out. Just make sure you have a good title company and enough backing and evidence to make sure that the contract holds at that point. You got any other questions? No? Awesome. Well, if anyone is interested in opportunities like that, this is my information right here. I also have a placard over there, but feel free to text me, email me, whatever works for you. I'd be happy to talk to you about wholesaling and any opportunities like that in the future. And with that being said, we're going to take about 5 minutes for these guys to get set up, and then we're going to move right into our deal or no deal segment, which will be very interesting as these guys